I never thought a neon-lit bar on a random Thursday night would feel more like a turning point than any graduation or final exam ever could. It wasn't even my idea to come. It was Leo's. Of course it was Leo's. He always had a way of dragging me out of my head and into the chaos of the present. That night, the present smelled like cheap cologne, buzzed with synth pop, and pulsed with the energy of people dancing their stress away under rainbow lights. It was the last place someone like me, quiet, overthinking, allergic to crowds, would normally end up. But then again, Leo had a way of making even the absurd feel safe. We'd been friends since the first year of college. He was everything I wasn't, loud without being obnoxious, confident without trying. While I buried myself in textbooks and avoided eye contact, he lit up lecture halls and made friends with professors. Somehow, we clicked. Or maybe I just let myself orbit him like some quiet moon, content to be pulled in by his gravity. Tonight was supposed to be a break. Exams were wrecking me. I hadn't slept properly in a week, my thoughts constantly knotted with deadlines and mental to-do lists. So when Leo messaged me, "You need a reset. I'm taking you somewhere loud and deeply unacademic," I said yes. Not because I liked bars or dancing or loud music, but because it was him. He was already waiting when I arrived, leaning casually against the brick wall outside, dressed in one of his signature tight tees and ripped jeans. His dark curls were damp from the spring rain, and there was that familiar crooked smile when he spotted me. "Dude, you look like your thesis just tried to murder you." Honestly, I wish it had. He laughed and slung an arm around my shoulder, like it was the most natural thing in the world. It sent a jolt through me, barely noticeable to anyone else, but enough to make me stare straight ahead and hope he didn't notice the color rushing to my face. Inside, the bar was all sound and light and too many people. I stuck close to him, always just a step behind. He moved through the crowd like he belonged there, like he'd been born under a disco ball. I told myself I came here to forget school stress. But if I was honest, completely, terrifyingly honest, I came because I was tired of pretending I didn't want more with Leo. And tonight, something in the air told me things weren't going to stay the same. Leo and I met during our freshman orientation, when the world still felt too big and everyone was clinging to any connection like a lifeline. I was standing awkwardly by the campus map, pretending I wasn't completely lost, when he walked up, pointed at the map and said, "This building doesn't exist. It's a prank. New students wander around it like ghosts." I blinked. "What?" "Kidding," he grinned. "But seriously, it's on the other side of campus. I can walk you there." And just like that, he became the only familiar face in a sea of strangers. We'd been inseparable ever since, though it didn't make sense on paper. He was extroverted, loud, and always had a social plan. I was quiet, a bit neurotic, and happiest with headphones on and my head buried in coursework. But he never made me feel like I had to be someone else. That was what made our friendship work. He accepted me exactly as I was, even when I didn't. Somewhere, along the line though, something shifted. Not in him. Leo stayed Leo. It was me. I started noticing things I wasn't supposed to. The way he ruffled his curls when he was deep in thought. The way he'd nudge me with his shoulder when I got too serious. The way he'd sometimes look at me for just a second too long before cracking a joke and looking away. But those were probably all in my head, right? We grabbed drinks and sat in the far corner of the bar, where the music wasn't so loud and the lighting was just dim enough to hide the storm brewing in my chest. He was telling a story about some guy who mistook him for a bartender last week, complete with animated gestures and terrible impressions, and I laughed in spite of myself. "You should do stand-up," I said, sipping from my glass. He leaned in. "You think I'm funny?" "I think you think you're funny." He laughed, and it was one of those real belly-deep laughs that always made something tighten in my chest. Then, as if on cue, the sky opened up outside. Through the windows, rain came down in sheets, blurring the streetlights and sending people Dashing into the bar, dripping and cursing, Leo checked his phone. Great. My car's parked 6 blocks away. I'm going to be soaked. I walked here, I said. His eyes flicked to me. You're kidding, I shrugged. Didn't think it'd rain. He laughed, but his brow furrowed slightly. You can't walk back in this. You'll get pneumonia or something. Just crash at my place. I froze, mid-sip. He caught my hesitation and added casually, We've done that before, dude. Don't act like I'm inviting you to sleep in my bed. Which, of course, made me think about sleeping in his bed. I managed to nod. Yeah, cool. That works. It was a simple offer. Practical even. But my brain wouldn't shut up. Staying over meant close proximity. It meant the quiet hours of the night, when thoughts got louder and the air felt charged with the things we never said. It meant one couch, one blanket, and his scent lingering on borrowed clothes. He nudged my knee with his. You okay? Yeah. I forced a smile, just thinking about how bad I am at umbrella ownership. He snorted. Good thing I've got spare clothes. You'll look hot in my sweatpants. My pulse jumped. That's not weird at all. He raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching. Relax, man. I'll even let you pick the movie. Tonight. I looked at him, really looked. And there it was again. That flicker in his eyes, the pause before he smiled. Like maybe he wasn't just joking. Like maybe he was testing the waters, or maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. Still, when he looked away and I let myself glance at his profile, the sharp jaw, the playful grin, I knew one thing for sure. This night was already starting to feel different. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. Sheets of water hammering the pavement as we ducked into Leo's apartment, soaked and laughing, tracking puddles into his entryway. My hoodie clung to me, heavy and freezing, and my shoes squelched miserably on the hardwood. Leo kicked his off with a sigh. All right, give me your clothes. I blinked. Sorry, what? You're drenched. Just toss your stuff in the dryer. I'll grab you something dry. He was already walking toward his bedroom, calling over his shoulder, You want my Jurassic Park shirt or the one with the flamingos? Flamingos. He came back, tossing it at my chest, followed by a pair of gray sweats that looked suspiciously worn in. I retreated to the bathroom to change, the door clicking shut behind me. The warmth of his clothes was immediate and disarming. They smelled like his detergent, that familiar soft citrus I always associated with him. I caught my reflection in the mirror, flushed, a little dazed. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been over a t-shirt. When I stepped out, he was in dry clothes too, sitting on the couch with a blanket draped over his shoulders and 2 mugs of something steaming on the coffee table. I made tea, he said, patting the spot. Beside him. Come on. You look like you just survived a shipwreck. I sat, careful not to let our knees touch. The blanket pooled between us, and I resisted the urge to shift closer. The apartment was quiet now, except for the muted sound of rain tapping. The windows. His TV screen glowed with the paused menu of some old action movie, but neither of us pressed play. He glanced at me. You all right? You've gone all quiet. I nodded. Just tired. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The truth was I was hyper-aware of everything. How close we were. The soft rhythm of his breathing. The way his fingers absent-mindedly tugged at the edge of the blanket. Every small gesture felt loaded, every glance lingering a beat too long. I was swimming in unspoken words, and I had no idea if he even noticed. Thanks for letting me crash, I said, voice low. He shrugged. It's not a big deal. You've done the same for me. That was true, but this felt different. This felt like a line was thinning, like we were dancing near the edge of something neither of us could name. Then the power went out. The apartment plunged into darkness, save for the faint light of street lamps filtering through the rain-speckled windows. Leo groaned. Of course. Perfect timing. I laughed under my breath. You pay your bill? He nudged me with his shoulder. Very. Funny, it's the storm. The room was colder now, the tea already cooling in our hands. Leo got up, rummaged around, and came back with a single candle, its flickering light throwing soft shadows across his face. No internet, no distractions, he said, settling in beside me again, this time under the same side of the blanket. We'll have to do the unthinkable, I raised an eyebrow. Talk? He grinned. Terrifying, right? I meant to make a joke back, but my voice caught in my throat. He was close. So close. His thigh touched mine now, warm through the sweats, and I felt every point of contact like it was branded into my skin. I couldn't focus on words. Just him, the curve of his smile. The way his eyes searched mine, softer than usual. Can I ask you something? He said, his tone shifting. My heart jumped. Yeah, sure. Have you ever... He paused, frowned slightly, then looked down. Never mind. Dumb question. What? He hesitated, then laughed it off. It's nothing. Just... I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if you ever think about stuff outside school, like after college, what you want, who you want to be with. Throat tightened. That wasn't nothing. I tried to play it cool. I think about it sometimes. And I don't always know the answer. He looked at me, really looked, his gaze searching. You ever feel like something's right in front of you, but if you reach for it, you might mess everything up? That hit me like a punch to the ribs. Yeah, I said quietly. All the time. The silence stretched, warm and full and dangerous. I turned my head and found him already watching me, his face unreadable in the candlelight. My breath caught. The air between us felt electric, charged with something unspoken and trembling. And then he reached up casually, like it meant nothing, and brushed a drop of water from my hair. You're still damp, he murmured, fingers grazing my forehead. You'll catch a cold. His touch lingered, just a second too long. My heart was roaring. I couldn't look away. And I couldn't bring myself to move, to break the moment, even though every nerve in my body screamed this was dangerous. This was too much. This could change everything. But he didn't pull away. Neither did I. The room felt small, like the walls were leaning in, holding us there. His thumb ghosted over my temple, and I swear he swallowed hard, like he was working something out silently in his eye. Head! Leo! He blinked, hand dropping slightly but still close. Yeah? I couldn't say it. Not yet. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But fear gripped my tongue. What if I'd misread everything? What if I said it and ruined the one thing I couldn't afford to lose? So I just whispered, nothing. Never mind. But the truth had already passed between us, unsaid maybe, but seen. He knew. I knew. The storm outside might have been loud, but the silence between us was louder, and neither of us moved. The candle flickered low, casting soft, pulsing shadows across the ceiling like slow waves. The blanket still draped over us, our bodies nearly touching now. Neither of us had moved since Leo brushed the water from my hair. My skin buzzed where his fingers had been. He hadn't said anything since, but I felt his thoughts like heat radiating off him, close, searching, almost loud. I wanted to reach out, close the gap, but every what-if rooted me to the spot. Do you ever, he began, his voice barely more than a breath, feel like something's been building for a long time, but you're not sure what it is until it's right here? I turned my head slowly, my heart pounding. Yeah, like a pressure under your ribs that won't go away. Leo let out a soft laugh, surprised, maybe relieved. Exactly that. His eyes met mine again, They were softer than I'd ever seen them, more open. He looked almost scared. I knew that feeling too well. "Earlier," he said, "when you didn't answer me right away. I wasn't sure if I was imagining all this." "You're not," I said, almost before I could think. "I just didn't know how to say it." Leo exhaled slowly. "Say what?" "That being around you." My throat went dry. "It's not just comfortable or easy. It's complicated. You've always been important to me, but lately it's felt like more. And I keep trying to talk myself out of it." His gaze didn't waver, but something in his expression cracked open, like he'd been waiting to hear those exact words. "Out of what?" he asked. My heart thudded hard against my ribs. "Out of falling for you." He inhaled sharply, blinking like I'd just knocked the wind out of him. The silence between us ballooned, heavy and fragile. I rushed on, voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. The late nights, the way you talk to me like you actually see me. I started noticing everything. How you laugh when you're trying not to. How you always make space for me, even when you're not aware of it. I don't want to screw this up, Leo, but it's been driving me crazy pretending like it's nothing." I finally stopped. My whole chest ached from the pressure of holding it in, and now it was out there, raw, terrifying, real. I braced myself for him to pull away, to let that silence stretch just long enough to break me. But Leo didn't move. His eyes dropped to my lips for the barest second before he whispered. I thought I was the only one. "What?" I've been trying to convince myself for weeks that this was just a phase, that I was just lonely or imagining things. But then I'd catch you looking at me like that. He smiled, small and shaken. And I'd realize I was looking back the same way. The air punched out of me. "So it wasn't just me," I said, barely daring to breathe. He shook his head. "It's never been just you." There was a beat, stillness, like the room itself was holding its breath. And then his hand reached for mine under the blanket. Slow, tentative. When our fingers touched, something clicked into place inside me, like a lock finally turning. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, and I felt the warmth of him spread up my arm like sunlight. "I'm scared," I said, my voice shaking. "What if this ruins everything?" "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But pretending it's not real already feels like we're losing something." I looked at our hands, then back at him. "What happens now?" Leo swallowed. "I don't know, but I don't want to stop being close to you just because we're afraid." I stared at him. His hair was still a little damp, curling slightly near his forehead. He looked so human in that moment, unguarded, hopeful, scared. And I realized then that I wasn't alone in this. Not really. "I want to kiss you," I said, almost in a whisper. "But not if you're not ready." He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me with this weight in his eyes, like the truth had been pressing against his ribs too long. Then he leaned in, his forehead resting lightly against mine. We stayed like that, barely touching, breathing each other in. "I've been ready," he murmured, just terrified. His lips brushed mine, soft, hesitant, asking for permission even in the way he moved. I tilted my head and met him halfway. The kiss was quiet. No fireworks, no drama. Just warmth. Truth. His mouth tasted faintly of the tea we'd forgotten, and his hands trembled slightly where they cupped my face. It wasn't perfect. It was better. Because it was us. When we pulled apart, he rested his head against my shoulder. Exhaling a breath I didn't know he'd been holding. "You okay?" I asked, threading my fingers through his. He nodded. I don't think I've ever felt more okay. Or more nervous. Same, I said. But also kind of like I can breathe again. He laughed softly, curling against my side. So now, what? Do we start dating? Hold hands in lecture halls? Share earbuds like one of those cheesy movies? I grinned. We could start with just seeing where this goes. No pressure. He looked up at me. I like that. Slow. Honest. We sat like that for a while, curled under the blanket as the rain softened against the windows, the candle flickering lower and lower. I keep thinking about how close I came to never saying anything, I admitted. How many nights I walked home from your place and told myself to let it go. Leo hummed. And I kept pretending every time you brushed my arm or looked at me too long that it was in my head. I smiled. God, we're idiots. Yeah, he agreed. But now we're idiots with our arms around each other. That earned a real laugh from me. True. Outside, the storm was beginning to let up. The sky beyond the window glowed faintly. An early hint of dawn, or maybe just the city lights breaking through the clouds. Leo leaned into me again, head resting against mine. Whatever this becomes, he said softly, I'm glad it started, here, with you. In this weird little moment we didn't expect. Me too, I whispered. Because despite all the fear and confusion, I knew something had shifted. Something fragile but real had opened between us. And maybe we didn't have all the answers. Maybe we never would. But tonight, we had the truth. And each other. And that was enough. Leo was still curled into my side, his fingers lazily tracing small circles on the back of my hand. It was the kind of contact that would have driven me crazy a week ago, subtle, impossible to read. But now it made my chest feel full in the best way. The candle had burned down to its stub, and the room smelled faintly of lavender and melted wax. We hadn't moved much since the kiss. Honestly, I didn't want to. I didn't want to risk breaking the fragile peace we'd carved out tonight. So, Leo said after a long silence, his voice muffled against my shoulder, what are the odds we can go back to normal after this? I turned slightly to look at him. 0. But I don't want normal anymore. Me neither. He smiled softly, then added, even though I was kind of a fan of our weird tension-filled movie nights. I laughed. You mean the ones where we sat 10 inches apart pretending we weren't noticing every little thing? Exactly. Elite content. He nudged my leg with his. Although I have to admit, this version, where I get to actually touch you, is kind of winning. My cheeks burned, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I slid my fingers between his. I keep waiting to feel weird about this, but I don't. It just makes sense. You and me. He tilted his head toward me, his hair brushing my jaw. Same. I mean, yeah, it's scary, and tomorrow might be complicated. But right now, all I'm thinking is how much I wish I'd kissed you weeks ago. I grinned. That's funny, because I've been mentally rehearsing kissing you since that night you wore that god-awful Christmas sweater, and somehow still made it look hot. He laughed, really laughed, and the sound settled in my chest like something I didn't know I'd been craving. I knew it, he said. You totally had a thing for me in that sweater. Don't get cocky, I said, nudging him. It was mostly the way you defended it like your life depended on it. Leo sat up slightly, resting his head on his palm as he faced me. So what happens now? I mean, when we leave here, go back to real life? I thought about that. About campus. Our classes. The way people might talk. But mostly I thought about him. Sitting across from me in the quad, or brushing against me in the coffee line, or walking beside me in that quietly protective way he always had. I think we take it slow, I said. Talk about stuff. Be honest. See where it goes. He nodded. I want that, I want to know what it's like to actually be with you, without pretending. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. A kind of tentative certainty. And if it gets hard, he asked, then we deal with it. Together. He looked at me like I'd handed him something fragile and valuable. I like the sound of that. We sat in the quiet hum of the storm's aftermath. Outside, the streets were wet and glistening, reflecting the dull orange of the street lamps. Inside, it felt like a new beginning was quietly unfolding between us. Leo reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering just a moment too long. You're really bad at hiding your feelings, you know, he said. Playfully. Oh, like you were so subtle, he grinned. Touché. I leaned into him again, this time letting myself rest my hand on his knee. Casual but familiar. We weren't tiptoeing anymore. I'm glad we ended up here, I said. Yeah, he murmured. Me too. Even if it took a gay bar, a storm, and a power outage to get us to say it. I laughed. Dramatic. Very on-brand for us. He kissed my cheek, soft and sure, then whispered, still worth it. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I believed that. Fully, completely. Because, even though we didn't have it all figured out, we had this moment. And it felt like the start of something real. The next morning, the city looked washed clean. Rainwater glistened in the gutters, and the sky held that quiet kind of blue that only shows up after a storm. Soft, forgiving, new. Leo and I stepped out of the bar together, blinking into the morning light like we were coming back from somewhere far away. In a way, we were. Neither of us said much at first. There was something sacred in the silence, in the way his shoulder brushed mine, not by accident this time. I caught him glancing at me every few steps, like he still couldn't quite believe the night before had actually happened. I knew the feeling. We walked until we reached the subway entrance, where our paths would split. I turned to face him, backpack slung lazily over one shoulder, nerves thrumming in my chest again. I knew what we'd said last night, what we'd promised, but morning had a way of making everything feel more fragile, more real. So, I said, trying to keep my tone light, this is the part where we awkwardly ask, what are we now? And ruin everything. Leo rolled his eyes, smiling. Okay, dramatic. I'm serious, I laughed, even though I meant it. Do we go back to flirting over bad horror movies? Pretend we didn't make out in a blackout? Or do we… I don't know. Try? Leo stepped closer. Not urgently, not dramatically, just close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. His hand reached down and found mine, fingers lacing with quiet confidence. That simple touch grounded everything. I vote for trying, he said, for real. I stared at our joined hands for a second. Are you sure? No, he admitted, chuckling softly. But I want to be, and I think that counts for something. The way he was looking at me, hopeful, a little scared but open, hit me like a second wave. I squeezed his hand. It counts for everything. We stood there like that, in the middle of a damp sidewalk, people bustling around us as if nothing life-changing had just happened. But for me, everything had. He pulled out a crumpled napkin from his jacket pocket and held it up with a shy, crooked smile. Okay, this is dumb, but remember when you drew that little alien doodle on my notebook last semester? The one with the crooked antenna? I blinked. Yeah. I kept it. He pointed to the sketch. Copied it onto this when you weren't looking. It kind of reminded me of you. All nervous and awkward and trying to blend in, but still. Kind of impossible to ignore. I laughed, too stunned to say anything at first. You absolute dork. Leo shrugged. Well, I figured, if we're doing this, maybe it should be our thing. A weird alien on a napkin. My heart cracked open a little more. I took the napkin and tucked it into my pocket, like it was something precious. That's our origin story then. Two idiots, one napkin. He grinned. Rolls off the tongue. We both laughed again, but underneath it, something settled. Something real. I knew it wasn't going to be simple. There'd be questions from friends, maybe awkward conversations. Moments where I'd overthink, or Leo would freeze up. But looking at him now, his easy smile, his steady grip on my hand, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Ready. I have class tomorrow, I said. But maybe you could come over after. We can watch another awful movie and see what it feels like to be in a universe where we actually talk about how we feel. Leo nodded. I'd like that. As long as you let me pick the movie. God, no. He leaned in and kissed me. Soft, certain, the kind of kiss that says, we're just getting started. And as he headed down the subway steps, our fingers trailing apart at the last second, I realized something. Last night had been a storm. But this was the morning after, and it felt like the start of everything.